is Spots and Cheap Pops, and it is Silicon Steve Valli. It is Friday. It's a SmackDown and Rampage Friday, and we are here to talk about the state of professional wrestling, some of the great things that happened throughout the week, some of the great things that happened, obviously, since our last episode dropped. We want to thank all the new subscribers on our YouTube page. We want to thank all the new listeners on our Spotify. Really starting to pop. Things are starting to cultivate. Oh, yeah. And want to thank Macho Man Randy Savage for coming by, of course, the other day. That's been a very, very popular one. People seem to like that one. We're going to keep on getting better. There's a lot of things on the horizon for High Spots and Cheap Pops. We're going to talk today. The big story out of yesterday, obviously, is going to be Dark Side of the Ring and the Steroid trial of 1994. And I think a lot of people, of course, the trial that had Vince McMahon against the federal government, and how Vince McMahon so very often during his heel days, his working heel days, he's doing a really good shoot heel these days. He famously said, "I beat the United States government. I did it, damn it, nobody else." And what this episode had really proven to me was how good of a lawyer McDevitt is. McDevitt is an absolute legend. I mean, and the things that he was coming up with seemed like it was so easy. The first thing that I didn't know was how Hulk Hogan got out of testifying. If you don't know, the story goes is there was a Dr. Laria was working for WWE. He was the one that was providing the steroids to all the wrestlers, or a lot of them anyway, not all of them. Don't want to get sued, but he was providing it. He got caught, and story goes is that steroids was just becoming a big thing. Lyle Alzado, I think, just died or just got diagnosed with cancer. And so steroids was a really, really big deal. And there were a lot of areas steroids were killing all over the place. The first one was the NFL, obviously. And then baseball had their problem, which we know very much about a couple of years later. Baseball was a little bit behind the curve because steroids in baseball wasn't considered a thing that would really matter that much. Mark McGwire would be a Hall of Famer if he wasn't accused of doing steroids and didn't admit to doing steroids. But he wouldn't be a Hall of Famer without the steroids. So you can see the position if you didn't think you were going to get caught. And professional wrestling is not one of competition. It's one of how you look. So you can make the argument it's even less scrupulous to do it to be a professional wrestler. And at the time, the professional wrestlers were taking these steroids. They were not even illegal. However, they became illegal, and a lot of people needed to come down on somebody. And who was the person to come down? Vince McMahon. They weren't going to come down on the NFL owners. Those are really big fish to go after. At the time, Vince McMahon wasn't a billionaire. The Attitude Era didn't happen yet. He's still just trying to coast as much as he can off of WrestleMania. This is a completely different entity than what the WWE is now. And very likely, if Vince McMahon did go to jail, even though I don't believe he should have, Vince McMahon did go to jail, WWE probably wouldn't have survived it. And if it did, it wouldn't have been the same. But who knows? He would have been out by early 2000s. WCW certainly would still be in business, wouldn't they? Just little things how life could have changed everything. So they had this doctor completely dead to rights. They had everything they need. But something happened at the end of his trial, his lawyer trying to do something to skirt any responsibility. They say, well, Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon bought their steroids from him as well. Which, by the way, is very true and probably at least very believable, if not true. Because Vince McMahon did do steroids. We know that. We know this. He didn't discourage it. We know this too, but he didn't sell them. So anyway, they had this. So anyway, after the lawyer brings up Vince McMahon and Hulk Hogan, the federal government's like, aha! So we can't go after our buddies because too much money comes out of the NFL to us in some weird way, hypothetically, in my opinion of speaking. But you can't come down on the NFL. It's too popular. too powerful. You're not going to try to take, I think, Pete Rozelle at the time or Paul Tagliabue, one of those two guys. You're not taking one of them to court. Vince McMahon, though, he's a little fish. So Jerry McDevitt gets hired, and by Vince McMahon, who was already hired by Vince McMahon. And Jerry McDevitt is as good of a lawyer as you'll ever see. That's what I got from this biography. I don't know if it's true or not, but it was definitely telling. So story goes, Hogan does not testify. Somehow he pulls out of the trick, because if Hulk Hogan testified, and he was a witness and he was excused, so Hogan was subpoenaed to testify in the case with this doctor. And so, long story short, McDevitt got Hogan out of it because Zalaria was actually had dealt with Hogan from a personal standpoint. So that would be doctor-patient privilege. And so McDevitt got Hogan excused from having to testify, because when he did take those steroids, when he was alleged to have done those steroids, the steroids, I guess, were illegal to take. That's how I understood it from McDevitt, listening to what he was saying last night. McDevitt look, if you believe everything that this really awesome lawyer says, then McDevitt and Vince McMahon, you think are angels here. But what have you. So we go on with the case, and obviously, as you know, at the end of that case, Zalaria's lawyer says McMahon and Hogan gets their drugs from. So once they realize that Hogan and McMahon are on the radar, they're like, okay, these are two of the biggest people in the industry of professional wrestling. These guys are good scapegoats to tattoo everything that's about steroids on here. Then we can forget about that pesky Lyle Alzado. Look it up. Look up Lyle Alzado. Great defensive player for the Oakland Raiders and LA Raiders, respectively. Are you done looking it up? I'm just kidding. So they decide to go after Vince McMahon, and the case is bullshit to begin with. You can tell from left and right. So what you got from the case was they were trying to get this little area where Vince McMahon acknowledged and did not discourage steroid use with that Dr. Zalaria after whatever. McDevitt was trying to make it like the doctor was testified against his will. That's probably not. I mean, I'm sure they wanted him to testify. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure they did certain things, but to sit there and suggest the guy was treated like shit for 44 days, it was like solitary confinement. He wasn't in the hole. I think of solitary confinement, I'm thinking of Andy Dufresne with a beard finding out that his friend just got whacked. You know what I mean? This was not that situation. McDevitt tried to play it out like that and tried to make Vince McMahon look as innocent as possible. That's what he's supposed to do. McDevitt's a great lawyer. You're not a great lawyer unless you lie. And McDevitt's really good at it. And he was whatever. This is the bottom line here. And so it goes to the bottom line is that Vince McMahon knew it was all going on, encouraged it, and took part in it. But he didn't sell it. Everybody was doing it on their own free accord. But if you look jacked up, Vince might like you a little bit more. If you lifted with Vince, he might like you a little bit more. If you did cherries with him, like Terry Bollea and Hulk Hogan did. Vince McMahon was almost like one of the guys. Don't forget how obsessed he was with bodybuilding. This motherfucker thought he was going to get a bodybuilding company off the ground. So that's what the situation was. And they brought a couple guys up here and there. Everyone's saying, no, Vince McMahon never sold us or told us we need to do steroids or cost us our job. That was the thing. No one said Vince didn't know about it. Nobody said that Vince didn't do them. Nobody said that Vince didn't do it with them. Nobody said any of that. But that's not something that you would spend millions and millions of dollars, which our government did, to try to bury Vince. Of all the shitty things Vince McMahon has done in the world, that what he was accused of in that case was not one of them. So we know what happens. Hulk Hogan testifies, clears Vince's name. A bunch of other wrestlers testified. The big one was Nails, who apparently was so stupid, didn't know what the word animosity meant. And I forget her name, and I apologize, Lauren something, I believe. The other counsel, the woman on the team who actually represented Vince McMahon personally, and Jerry McDevitt had actually represented WWE. So it was two different defenses, one for Vince and one for WWE, and it was a really smart reason for it. McDevitt said because he already argued for Vince in a different matter that's similar to that was related to this one. He couldn't represent Vince, but he can represent WWE. Brings in a woman who was a phenomenal examiner. And there were a couple damaging things that just sounded like it was too perfect and too weird. Nails, and I forget his real name, but Nails had said, yes, Vince McMahon threatened to dismiss me if I didn't do steroids. And it was clearly bullshit. And then the woman's like, do you have any animosity toward Vince McMahon? He's like, kind of looked at you, said no. And then she directed the honor. He doesn't know what animosity is. Do you hate Vince McMahon? Yes, I hate Vince McMahon. So it was a joke. It sounded like it was an absolute joke. And McDevitt famously said in this episode, I don't know if it's famously, it should be. He said, I didn't spend 1 minute thinking about us losing. And it didn't sound like there was ever a chance. The former assistant of Vince McMahon, who also had some book deals working out and all these other kind of things. There were some interesting things that happened. We certainly could touch on Vince McMahon being embarrassed on national television by Azario and Dave Meltzer. Azario said, hey, look, or Zari, he said, hey, look, you said you were devastated Hulk Hogan and what he did on Arsenio. It wasn't truthful. And McMahon was like, I didn't say I was devastated. I never said devastated. Shaking his head like this. And then Meltzer's right next to him, like, well, that's the exact word you use. And she saw it on his face, like, okay. But I mean, we know Vince is a liar. He's a ruthless businessman, and we know that he's a phony when it comes to a lot of things, when it comes to legalities. He's a boomer. That's how big boomers did business. Boomers do business like that. They don't think lying, if it's business, it doesn't matter as long as you beat the other guy. So Vince doesn't care if he lied. We knew he was a liar. So there was no big revelations that came out here. I think a lot of people were coming into this thinking the dark side of the ring, steroid trial, it's going to blow the roof off. We thought maybe it would be even worse in terms of bombshells and revelations than the plane ride from hell. I don't believe that was the case in this at all. The only thing I'll say that I got out of it, a couple details here and there. Certainly the detail about Azaria trying to say that he had guys showed up at his house. So he didn't even see, his mother did. I mean, there was a lot of bullshit, I thought. I thought Azaria was, kind of a hack, Mark Hack. He's been doing a wrestling. What kind of loser does a wrestling talk show? Anyway, so that was my big takeaway. So what the bottom line here is that, and you saw the picture that McDevitt was playing. Jerry McDevitt was very good at laying out the facts. He was like being a lawyer. It was probably fun for him to relive these great ideas that he had, and he was able to beat the federal government. I mean, that's something to stick in your hat. He mentioned it. He said statistically, he looked. And you talked about doing your due diligence. This guy found out everything he needed to about steroids just to help his client out. Battle tooth and nail. And McDevitt wound up handling so many things for Vince McMahon over the years. Obviously did the Chris Benoit situation, did the Owen Hart situation, and everything in between. And so what you get from that, even though it was a probable win, it still was a very big win for Vince McMahon. Obviously kept him out of jail. Hulk Hogan said that it wasn't for him, Vince McMahon. Yeah, if Hulk Hogan lied on the stand and said Vince McMahon sold him the drugs, yeah, Vince McMahon went to jail, but I don't think Hulk Hogan seemed like he was trying to get credit for telling the truth and not putting a man in jail. And it's a good thing he didn't, because does the wrestling business survive without Vince McMahon? And that brings me to my last point when I'm going to talk about this. I kill Vince McMahon on this show. If you watch this, I destroy Vince McMahon. I have a video named Fuck You, Vince. That being said, there is nothing that can quantify the importance he had on this industry. There is nothing that we could say or do, no matter the biggest detractors of Vince McMahon. If we're going to be completely honest with him, and we know here on High Spots and Cheap Pops, honesty is the number one priority. We're not going to bullshit you. We don't have an agenda. We want professional wrestling, WWE and AEW. We want it all to be great. We want everyone to make money. I want to make money reporting on it. I want to get back in professional wrestling and maybe be a manager for some one really talented and lucky son of a bitch who I decided to take under my wing. I'm not sure if I'm ready for that yet. But the Kings of the Valley will ride again. But that's a whole other story. The fact remains is that Vince McMahon won this battle, and he should have. He was the underdog because it was the U.S. government. Obviously, when the game started, we knew it was over. We knew Vince didn't have anything because they didn't have anything on him. It was literally a witch hunt. Of all the shitty things Vince McMahon done in his life that he didn't pay for, this was not one of them. This was a guy who just loved bodybuilding, who encouraged and loved steroids. Hey guys, let's go do some steroids. Now you can argue, this is where we can argue. Before we get into what we can argue about, but make no mistake, Vince McMahon, it is a very damn good thing that man didn't go to jail, because there would have been a lot of entertainment, a lot of moments that we never got. So with that, after the previous Dark Side of the Ring, I say kudos to you, Vince McMahon, for beating the government. The government said, we're going to try to take this man down. We don't like the way he does business. We don't like his arrogance. So my point is here, folks. Vince McMahon deserves a lot of credit. We give him a lot of grief. And there is millions of people all over the internet who try to take a shot. And I'm one of them, by the way. But I will be honest. And Vince McMahon stood tall, got some great lawyers to help him, and he beat the United States government, and then he was able to give us some of the best professional wrestling moments we've ever seen. He can call it sports entertainment all he wants. It's always professional wrestling. So I'm very grateful for Jared McDevitt in that instance. I'm sure it'll be consistent. Next week, we talk about Owen Hart's death. I'm just kidding. Jokes. How do you pull the show out of that fucking hole? Well, you take a hit of this great marijuana brought to you by So, but the bottom line is our biggest takeaways here, folks. Biggest takeaways. Vince did the exact same thing that Major League Baseball owners did and the NFL owners did. Maybe he took it a step further with participation with it. But at the end of the day, they were making money, they were looking good, and they were performing well. Just like fucking Sammy Sosa, just like Lyle Alzado, just like Barry Bonds, just like Mark McGwire. Just like a ton of other NFL players. That list is both lists are, I'd be here all day if I had to name all the people. If it's steroids illegally and against, to cheat and look better. I give it a little bit of a pass for the WWE because that's presentation. It's not really a competition. However, if you're in the WWE and you look like $1 million opposed to Bret Hart, well, Bret Hart's not going to get a push until steroids is a thing, right? Or Shawn Michaels, for that matter. That wasn't a coincidence that Bret Hart got the titles that quickly, folks. Everyone knows they went smaller for a reason. That was right around 93, 94, 95. So very good Dark Side of the Ring. But if you were looking for bombshells, those of you who didn't watch it, if you're looking for bombshells, no bombshells really. You do come away, just basically, it was kind of like when WikiLeaks drops and tells you something about somebody, and it's like, well, we always knew that kind of. Now we just got confirmation. Same kind of vibe here. We knew Jerry McDevitt was a great lawyer, i.e. a great liar, and he was able to paint the picture beautifully to make Vince McMahon a victim in this situation. And guess what? Vince McMahon was a victim in this situation. And there was one touching moment with McDevitt. He talked about Stephanie, and he got really choked up because she was really upset. And you got to kind of feel for Stephanie. Hearing, and at the time, she was 92, so 94, so she must have been a mid-teenager, maybe in college. And she was crying. I guess she was really upset. And Jerry McDevitt consoled her. And it's just such like a movie. He's like, hey, you didn't see me do this yet. And then she looks up. She's like, okay. And then you hear the music go off as he walks into the courtroom. And Jerry McDevitt crushed his closing, as many people say, even though Sean O'Shea, the prosecutor, apparently cut one of the best wrestling promos ever. I wish there was I really do honestly wish there was a video of that. I don't know. I've never seen it, but I hear it was one of the great wrestling promos of all time, Sean O'Shea. It started really calm. And at the end, it was just basically saying a lot of truths about Vince McMahon, but none to get him thrown in jail. Very interesting. So, and McDevitt got choked up when he was telling that story. So, you like moments like that. I think we really dehumanize the McMahons so often. I don't really with Stephanie, because everything she does outside of the ring just seems to benefit the human race. Just her attitude about things, strong woman. It's great to see that as a father to a little girl. So I love Stephanie McMahon, the person. I absolutely love. I don't know, I'm not going to go into what kind of job she does because I don't know. But I love Stephanie in terms of just the way I think she doesn't have to pay for the sins of her father or anybody else in her family for that matter. And cheers to you, Steph, and so that was a really nice moment to bring her involved with that young Stephanie, who's grown to be a very strong, awesome lady, and Jerry McDevitt to consoling her. And then Jerry McDevitt goes in, maybe with her on the brain, absolutely crushes his closing. And they wound up, and funny story though, I will say this. So there was an idea. Vince McMahon wore a neck brace because he had a neck problem, apparently. And he wore it during the court case. And it makes sense. He wore it during the court case because he wasn't going to be on TV. And he said that was a good time to have surgery or whatever happened. So it made sense, but we know Vince McMahon better than that. He's not wearing a fucking neck brace and looking weak in any other position he's in. And that's when I knew Jerry McDevitt's full of shit. He's like, oh, no, he was really hurt. And then after that night, and so McDevitt tells a story after Vince is wearing this neck brace to court every day during this trial. McDevitt goes to Vince, they're drinking, having a couple cocktails, and McDevitt says to Vince, he's like, hey, you won the case, you can take your neck brace off. And Vince takes it off and goes like that. And apparently that was just a joke, but is that the most professional wrestling? It's so much how life imitates art with Vince McMahon. And in more ways than one, but that's a whole other story in a video we're working on.